It's times like this when I feel the most alone.
But River, you know you're not alone, right? I feel the same way though.
Me too.
Me too.
Especially when I went to the police. They asked me what I was wearing.
I went to the Office of Judicial Affairs. They asked me how drunk I was.
I went to the university authorities, UBPD. They asked me why I was out so late.
I went to my friends. They told me I was crazy. Why can't you go back to the status quo?
I didn't go to my friends. They would never understand.
I went to my family. They told me to stop making things up for attention. Girls don't do that.
I didn't go to my family. They could never understand.
I went to my father. He said I was a disgrace.
I went to my mother. She didn't say anything.
I went to my sister. She called me a whore.
I went to my brother. You can never speak ill of a fellow soccer player. Boys will be boys. And of course, dude, are you gay or something?
I went to the local grocer. She didn't think girls were aggressive.
I went to the
So hi, my name's Nicole Rizzo. I'm majoring in English and minoring in Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies. And the title of my keystone is To Stop Treading Water, Monologues that Challenge the Undertow of Trauma. This is a play that I have written and directed. It was advised by the wonderful Professor Preston. And that little clip you just saw is a snippet from the performance this past Wednesday. And we'll get back to that a little bit later. So first, please keep in mind this water imagery. This is something that we'll figure throughout the presentation, and I'll come back to it later, but keep the water imagery in mind. So many of you may be aware of the pervasive sociocultural problem of sexual assault, particularly on college campuses. I mean, think about what you're hearing in the media right now with like Harvey Weinstein, Kevin Spacey, Bill Cosby, the Stanford swimmer Brock Turner, Al Franken, and even the President of the United States. Well, I think there's a lot of important awareness-raising, productive awareness-raising work going on right now, especially through the revival of movements like Me Too on various social media platforms. I don't think the same degree of attention is being paid to the diverse psychological ramifications of sexual trauma, or the after effects. And it was my hope with this project to give voice to those experiences and to inspire a call to action. So my project is essentially an activist endeavor. It took an intersectional approach, meaning that I looked at the ways that diverse modes of oppression like racism, sexism, homophobia, and ableism all contribute to these experiences and contribute to something called rape culture. Now, rape culture is basically the normalization of sexual violence, and it draws on something that is called victim-blaming rhetoric. And victim-blaming rhetoric places the onus of accountability on the survivor or victim, however they choose to identify. So this project was something that I wanted to challenge rape culture and expose the violent silencing of this rhetoric. So you kind of got a preview of that slide, it skipped forward, but some of you may be wondering, like, what are the keystone components? So I wrote the script, which is a series of monologues that I turned into a play. I also directed and produced the play, and I worked with a wonderful tech team and a bunch of actors, and I also worked with a web designer who created a website and educational materials. Many of you have them right now, along with the playbill. You can read my director's note if you would like. But this is the show poster. The show happened this past Tuesday and Wednesday at 7 p.m. in the Killishawn Common Room. And just to give you a little snippet of like what it kind of consisted of, the play consisted of monologues, movement, there was dance, and we had an improvisational violinist play like jazz music throughout it. So a lot of different components, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Some of you may be wondering, like, where did I, get the inspiration for this? I get this question a lot. So there are two avenues through which I did research. The first avenue is through interviews. I engaged with something called ethnography, meaning that I conducted interviews with actual sexual trauma survivors. I talked to 8 people, and I used their stories to inform the themes of the play. So I made a theme chart, and I noticed, after color coding it, that there were like moments that overlapped, and then there were moments that were like incredibly different. And I felt like that was evocative of the diverse array of trauma responses, and that translated to my performance as well. On the other hand, I did a senior thesis for the English department that informed my play, and I looked at plays such as Eve Ensler's The Vagina Monologues. Maybe some of you are familiar with this performance. VU puts it on every year. I read Paula Vogel's How I Learned to Drive, and Satake Shange's For Color Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough, Sherry Moraga's not Heroes and Saints, Giving Up the Ghost, Sarah Kane's Blasted, Jean Genet's The Blacks, and Adrienne Kennedy's Funny House of a Negro. So this project looked at the ways that forms of postmodern drama, these are all postmodern plays, construct trauma narratives. And throughout doing this research, I realized that there were several themes that came up. The idea of being like fragmented, themes of disorientation, confusion, and the idea of liminality. And all of these sort of informed my thinking about how I would write my play. If you think back to the video I showed you at the beginning, there were a lot of different voices kind of interrupting each other, and I feel like that is evocative of post-traumatic stress disorder and the kind of psychic interruptions and intrusions that can happen. And then back to the idea of liminality. If you think back to the image of water I showed you at the beginning, I think water is a powerful liminal image. Some of you may be wondering, like, what do I mean by liminal? Liminal is something that's like in between. So water is in between a state of solid and gas. It's constantly in flux and in motion. Liminal zones or spaces are places for possibility. So I thought this was an appropriate image for a play where I wanted to inspire a call to action. And I feel like water as a liminal zone potentially could inspire like transformation and a call to action, social change. So the themes. I think it would be very difficult for me to stand here and kind of give you the overarching narrative arc of the performance, because I think that would be antithetical to the message. And the message is that there is no one narrative. There is no one way that people deal with their trauma. So I'm just going to give you a few highlights. So there was one monologue that dealt with the issues of nightmares and flashbacks. So I had a character named Aqua go underwater with a camera, and she was looking for something called a cuttlefish. And a cuttlefish is like this cute little squid thing. It's kind of creepy, but it's small. And as she's looking for the cuttlefish, she raises her camera and is about to take a picture of the cuttlefish, but then suddenly it becomes a giant sea squid. And then it's no longer a giant sea squid, it's actually her uncle who had been abusing her 16 years earlier. I had monologues that talked about the injustices within particular institutions like education and the judicial system. So that piece you saw at the beginning kind of speaks to that issue. I had monologues talking about the erasure of particular individuals from this community, like male survivors, as well as erasure within the LGBTQ community. I had a monologue that talked about consent and sexuality. I actually had 2 actors spell out the word fuck in 2 different ways, and they talked about consent in relation to that word. And then I had a monologue about PTSD by a character named River. And that one kind of draws on my inspiration from Shangai's work. She created something called a choreo poem, and for those of you that don't know what that is, a choreo poem is a combination of music, movement, monologues, and like poetry. So that monologue combined all of those elements. So I threw a bunch of names at you. Here's the characters and cast list. We had a cast understudy. All the names are water themed. To put some faces to those names, that's River, Marisol, Aqua, Dennis, the cast understudy, Laga, Misty, and Sandra Mara. This was our musician who played improvisational jazz music throughout the entire performance. And it was incredible. I think she added a layer of tension that was so effective. And then we did movements, and the movement was inspired by Professor Preston. And I know we don't have a lot of time, but if for any of you that feel comfortable, I'm going to go through some of the movements. And Hurrah, if you want to help me, I'll just do some of the poses that we engaged with, and feel free to stand up and join me if you'd like. So the first movement begins in this position. You're laying down, and then you feel the energy push you forward. So you bring your hands up. And you step around yourself and reach up like you're trying to break the surface of the water. And then you make a fist, and you go down into this punching position. And then after that, you come up like you're holding a big bubble. And then you move forward like a wave, and then you can turn back over yourself and reach up and break the surface again. Thank you, Hurrah. Yeah, there you go. And then I'm just really grateful to the tech team. I had hair and makeup, costumes, stage management. The actors all came together because they were working on a magazine called Fish, which is for individuals seeking hope. It was a feminist magazine interested in combating rape culture. If you notice in the costumes, there's a squid hat when I had characters who were not themselves when they took on the roles of perpetrators and other roles. I wanted to make that very clear to the audience that they're playing a different role, so they would put on a squid hat, which is evocative of the squid and cuttlefish imagery I mentioned earlier. That's got a technical term. It's called a Brechtian alienation technique, but we don't have to get into that now. This is the website. You can go online and check it out. There should be the entire play posted on it soon. This is my entire cast, and I'm really grateful for everyone here who supported me and made this possible. I'm really grateful to the survivors who spoke to me. It's been a transformative experience, and I'm grateful for all the people who saw it, and I hope that this performance is able to inspire more conversations about challenging the undertow and learning about stopping, and inspiring us to stop treading water. Thank you. Sorry, that was really rushed. Any questions? Yes.
What do you think was the hardest part of putting this all together?
Definitely the directing. I've never directed before. So she asked, yeah, the question was, what's the hardest part? And I feel like directing was the hardest part because I've never done it before. I really came into it not knowing like how to be a good director, but my cast really helped me kind of come up with movement, and it was a really like collaborative work experience. Yes.
What was a comment that someone kind of made to you after watching one of the plays and that stuck with you? What do you think is something that other people have gotten from this?
I've had people come up to me and tell me that it resonated with them in different ways, even if they like may or may not have had that experience. It was really touching to hear that during one of the talkbacks, one of my actors said that like it was the most important theater production she'd ever done. That's something that is going to stay with me for a long time because it makes me feel like I was able to really connect with the cast and help them help me to be a better leader. So that is something I will always remember. Yes.
Will you be, or have your interviewees seen the play or like looked at it?
Some of them have. I reached out, but again, I haven't gotten responses back from some people though. They're busy, I'm sure. But yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
What do you think your biggest takeaway from this project was, and what do you think is the biggest takeaway you would hope someone looking at your project would have?
Okay, so the question was, what's my biggest takeaway and the biggest takeaway for someone else? So I guess I'll talk to what I hope for other people. I hope this play inspires more conversations about how, I don't want to say debilitating, but like difficult it is to deal with the after effects. I feel like this is something people don't talk about, and I hope this inspires people to like talk about why rape culture is so pervasive and find ways of combating it. I guess, yeah, I hope people take away that we need to continue this conversation. We need to go out and do things to stop this from happening to people. And then for me, I guess it's, I don't know, getting to work with an incredible cast and crew, engaging in the interviews. I think for me, the biggest thing is like having those interviews with the trauma survivors and being like, having them trust me enough to like share their stories with me. I think that's a huge takeaway, is that, you know, people, it's not, the silence needs to be broken, and I feel like, yeah, it needs to keep happening. That's kind of answered your question, but yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Well, then I'll take it on to the next person. Catherine.